Hello, here we are once again for Dog Talks. And in this episode of Dog Talks, we'd like to talk a bit about perfection and imperfection, or perfectionism versus feelings of imperfection. Just a word about the dogs here. These dogs are far from perfect. Do we need to tell stories? No, we probably should spare you those stories of their lack of perfection. And yet, in spite of their obvious imperfections, they both have weird little perfectionist streaks in them. Zazu here, for instance, when he goes out to potty, insists that he has to find exactly the perfect spot in which to do so. And it sometimes takes a long time for him to scout out the entire yard and determine what exactly that perfect spot is. Mowgli, say hello again, Mowgli. You sat up just in time and then you laid your head back down. We actually think Mowgli has OCD. He has a number of behaviors and habits that just seem in that direction, and the dog whisperer that we take him to sometimes has confirmed that could possibly be the case. One of his things, for instance, is when he comes up from the lower level of our house into the main floor, where there's kind of a circular route between the hallway and the main room here and the kitchen, he always has to go to the right. He always goes only in one direction. He can't possibly go the other direction. That's just his way. Has to go only the one way. That's the only proper way. That's the only perfect way. Those are just my dog stories to introduce this topic of perfectionism. In the lesson, you had quite a bit of material about the errors of perfectionism that you see in the doctrine of some theologians or churches. I want to talk about the problem of perfectionism, or feelings of imperfection to the point of being a spiritual malady that I've seen sometimes in our own people, in our own churches. I had a young student at the college one time as a freshman, and we were doing a course together, had online postings like we're doing in an online course, but also classroom interactions, and she's doing work in the classroom, submitting assignments, posting online posts. And a few weeks into the course, I just sent an email to this student to offer her some commendation for how thoughtful many of her posted comments were, her in-class comments, some of the essay writing that she had done. I just gave her a little bit of praise and applause for good things that she had done. Shortly thereafter, she showed up at my office, nearly in tears, and sat down, and I said, "My goodness, what's wrong?" And she said, I just read your email, and I was so touched by it, I had to come and talk to you. She told me in all of her career as a student, as far as she could remember, grade school, high school, in Lutheran schools, she said, "I've never been praised. No teacher has ever praised my work." She was a student who always struggled somewhat. And she didn't get great grades. She didn't memorize well. She didn't do some of those traditional student things well, and felt like she was a low achiever, felt like she couldn't do much, had sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy of low grades and late work. And she struggled with some other issues personally and learning disability-wise and things like that. She was just stunned to receive praise from a professor, and we developed an ongoing connection from there, and I just challenged her to continue to do good work, and we worked out schedules so that if she was behind on something, I didn't penalize her too severely, because I wanted her good work, not just rushed to get something turned in work. And it was just amazing to see the transformation in her once she realized she wasn't this horribly flawed, terrible person, bad student who couldn't do anything right, but actually had a lot of mental and communicative capability, some great possibilities in the way that she expressed herself that I wanted to nurture and encourage. And so that was a side of the story from the students that see themselves as hopeless, as underachievers, as I'll never be able to do this. And I've met so many students and congregation members like that through the years that need to be encouraged with the good news of the Lord and with praise and encouragement from brothers and sisters in the Lord that yes, they can do good work in God's name. I've also had many students in the congregation, many members as well. But in my career here as a professor, many students particularly who really struggle with perfectionism, where I must do everything exactly to the very best and the utmost, and would become paralyzed in that way. One of the best students I had in one of my courses was just swamped and falling behind in her work because she couldn't get it all done to the extreme level of perfect capability and quality that she expected of herself. And she was driven to make everything absolutely the best essay ever written, or absolutely fill out every worksheet or assignment with as much thoroughness as could thoroughly be thoroughly done. And it was driving her to the point of exhaustion and a spiritually unhealthy state. So even in our Lutheran churches where we have an understanding that we have the grace of Christ and that we are not needing to be perfect in our spiritual selves, I believe there are many of us who still struggle with those things, either from not appreciating the gifts God has given us and not being appreciated for them, not having anyone encourage us in them, and feeling like we're losers somehow, when God would want to build us up in the expression of our faith and in the use of our talents. And we also have many who struggle with this perfectionist streak, which perhaps is related to the same thing, that we have to prove ourselves, we have to prove we're good enough, and it drives them into emotional disturbance and physical and sleep exhaustion and all sorts of problems that are just not healthy for a child of God. So let's consider this topic of perfectionism not only from the standpoint of church bodies that get that entirely wrong in terms of our sanctification, but how we in the church ourselves can encourage one another to remain balanced and spiritually and emotionally healthy when it comes to how we live as imperfect beings that are yet made perfect by Christ and encouraged and empowered by His Holy Spirit to do the best that we can do in our day-to-day lives. This has been another episode of Dog Talks. Thank you, dogs.